You're all.
Here it is.
Now
I noticed it didn't give you, like, do you have to sign something?
we are good. Yeah, let me just check this right here. Got it. Perfect.
Okay.
Good to go.
So Wesley, thank you for joining in, and I should say being a host, since you have the most experience in this industry, over 20 something years in the real estate market, and I'm hosting it, but this is your area expertise. So I want to take the time to thank you for doing this segment to talk about the real estate industry and the market. The market is a bit different right now, different from what it's been in many years. So I wanted to bring you on and share your experience and knowledge about the real estate industry for home buyers, people looking to buy a home, and maybe this might even benefit a seller, but this is mainly geared to people who are trying to understand the current market and the home buying experience, especially right now when prices are so high.
Yeah, Karen, thank you for having me. I was originally licensed in 2002 and got off to a great start in real estate at the time. The market was on the upswing. And, after about 2 or 3 years of experience, I bought my first home in 2004. And then really, was just on a fantastic career trajectory. And then 2007 happened with the commercial-backed securities, the adjustable rate mortgages that caused the market to basically crash. Prices skyrocketed, and then they plummeted. So, real estate happens in cycles, generally somewhere between 12 and 15 years. Our last peak market peaked at 2007. So here we are exactly, 15 years later, right on time. We are at another peak. And the past 2 years of this real estate market has really been unlike any other, because this time around we had something that I don't think we've had something like the pandemic that happened in we got the news in January of 2020, and then by March 16th we literally had a shutdown. The market, real estate agents were told to cease and desist all business activities. Now, some of us continue to plow right through. We said we're not going to just stop earning money. We have bills to pay. We have people depending on us. And we did our best to continue to do business under the radar. But that pause in the market really kicked off a race, an absolute frenzy of home buying that when they shut us down March 16th of 2020, it was about sometime in May. So we had all of April. It was literally about 2.5 months. And then as soon as they let us get back to work, ever since then, it has been nonstop competition. Prices over the past 2 years have increased at a extremely high percentage. So, we call that inflation. Normally over time, real estate will increase 2 to 3% per year. So if we have a $200,000 property and it goes up 3%, that's $6,000. That's normal. Okay. And, when the market, we call it balanced market, when there are just as many sellers and there's buyers, and a house might sit on the market for 60, 90 days. Now we're in a market where a house is going to be sold in 6 or 7 minutes. So yeah, we've had some dramatic changes, and it's right now it's literally at, I try to stay positive, but to be a home buyer right now, to be honest, I would tell people it is the absolute worst time to buy real estate unless you absolutely have to and have a lot of cash.
So if I could stop you for a moment, can you tell us a little bit about what happened? How did it go from your typical going to see a home with whomever, your partner, your husband, whatever, and looking at a home and waiting and thinking and saying, hey, I think I really like this house, to a house selling in 10 minutes? How did that happen?
So, if we rewind things to when the market was down, okay, the market was down because the federal government made it very difficult to get a mortgage, right? So it's just supply and demand economics. When the demand for homes is low because buyers are having a hard time getting qualified for financing, and there may be a lot more people selling. So we call that inventory. So when the inventory is high and demand is low, that's a buyer's market. And we call it the absorption rate. Okay. So let's say you have 20 people that want to buy a home, and there's 5 homes that sell per month. Okay. So over 4 months, those 20 buyers will purchase those homes. It'll take 4 to 5 months before that inventory is consumed. Okay, so that's a balanced market. If there are more homes for sale than there are buyers, and the inventory is going to be absorbed by the buyers over 5, 6, or 7 months, that is a buyer's market. The buyers have time. They can go out, look at a home, and come back 2 weeks later, and it'll still be sitting there. And then, the price may actually come down. The price will come down until it's at a price that's attractive enough for a buyer to buy. So the opposite of that is when inventory is very low, and there are many more buyers in the market, right? So it's high demand, low supply. So in 2017, 18, and 19, things were pretty balanced. Okay, we were seeing appreciation. We were seeing the home values were creeping back up to the prices where they left off when they were at a high in 2007. So in the beginning of 2020, interest rates were low. So when interest rates are low, that's basically like borrowing money. It's cheap money. Okay, it's if you have to borrow if you have to take a mortgage out at 6% versus 3%, the higher interest rate is going to cause that monthly payment to be higher, right? So it costs more. I just refer to it as it costs more to borrow money. The money's expensive at a high interest rate. So in 2020, the interest rates were low. They were right around 3.5%. And so when COVID hit, there was a freeze, and there was a lot of people that did not buy a home. Like they suspended their home buying. COVID hit in March, and that's the spring market. So all of the buyers that were waiting for the sellers to put their house on the market in the spring market kicks off March 1st. And as soon as the spring market kicked off, it was put on hold. Okay, so all of these home buyers that were ready to go now had to wait. While they were waiting, new home buyers were entering the market. Every month, new home buyers show up. People get to the end of a lease. People get a job relocation. So, every month, so while we were suspended in limbo, waiting for the government to let us continue business, the normal number of buyers doubled, then doubled again. So, and not only that, but fewer people wanted to put their house on the market because they were afraid that people with COVID were going to come in. So anybody who was thinking about selling and didn't have to sell because they weren't getting a job relocation, they did not want to put their house on the market. They were terrified. They were afraid. So fewer people decided to put their house on the market who were planning to move. Another factor, companies did everything they can to adjust and give their employees the ability to work from home. So that's another reason why people did not need to relocate all of a sudden. And then as soon as home buyers realized that they did not have to live close to work, that caused a lot of people in our market in the city of Philadelphia who only really moved to the city because they had to. Now, as soon as they realized they did not have to live in a tiny little city place with no parking and pay city wage tax, which is about 4% of their income. As soon as they realized that now they could get out of the city and get into the suburbs, that was yet another factor that created more buyers that wanted to that wanted to buy. So they had low interest rates. They were waiting. It's, think of like the horses at a horse race when they're in the gates and they're as soon as the gates open and they're ready to go. Well, imagine there was like 10 races scheduled that day. So the first 10 horses, and then now there's 100 horses waiting for the gates to open. That's what happened. So as soon as those buyers were allowed to go out and start looking at homes, there was fewer sellers. There was probably, I would say 1 out of 25% of the people who were going to sell decided to sell. This is in 2020. Sure. So there's 25% of the sellers, and now there's 500% more buyers. So it was just
a buying frenzy.
Yeah, totally lopsided. And also during that time period, home buyers were saving money. They were not going out to eat. They couldn't go out and spend money. So they had more cash in their pockets. And so that's kind of what kicked off this whole frenzy. And it literally has not stopped. It has only gotten worse. Now, just over the past 2 years, instead of having a healthy 3% annual increase in prices, appreciation, we had about 15% in 2020 and about another 15 to 20% in 2021.
Sure.
So a $200,000 house went from 200 to 260, and then it went from 260, it jumped up again. So a $200,000 home is now $300,000 or more. A $500,000 home is now $750,000. That's what has happened. And so I tell people, look, if you are in a rental and your rent is up, so there's another factor. During this 2-year time period, the demand for rents increase. The rental market is also heated up. Okay, so. And landlords have been raising rents. And as soon as rents, as soon as the cost to rent is equal to or greater than the cost to buy, that creates more buyer demand. So all of those factors have contributed to this buying frenzy. And that's where we are.
Sure. So we have spoken about when the market calms down, what anticipation is there for the overall equity in the home? I know you mentioned the house, 200,000 goes for much more than it would ordinarily. So what happens to the value of a home if it's purchased now during this period where values basically overstated, or what more than what it's going to be in whatever length of time?
Right. So, let's just take your typical 3-bed, 2-bathroom, 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, probably has a 1-car garage, minimal size yard, just the average home that most average people with an average income can afford. Okay. That townhome used to be $250,000. So you could purchase that home if you had an FHA mortgage or a conventional mortgage, 3.5% down plus closing costs. You might need 25 grand, but you could get a seller's assist in the amount of 6% of the purchase price. So you would really only need $10,000 to buy a $250,000 house, which most average people would be average, I would say happy with, or at least satisfied at an average. So, and that, the cost to own that home for $250,000 might be $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 a month. Okay. And that's, to buy a home, it's wise to spend no more than 1/3 of your income to cover your housing payment. So if it costs you $1,500 a month, 1/3 is $4,500, and you should be making $4,500. In my opinion, that's your net income after tax, right? So pre-tax might be, let's say you make $60,000 a year. That's $5,000 a month. After tax, that's $4,000. So $1,500 a month payment. That's healthy and that's normal. If you make $60,000, you can afford to buy a $250,000 house. That's to me, in my mind, doing this for 20 years, that sort of has been the norm. Okay. But of course, now we have 2-income households where maybe the average salaries combined is 120 grand. So they can afford much more. But the trouble is now that $250,000 house is now $350,000. And now that monthly payment is no longer $1,500, $1,600, $1,700. Now it's $2,200, $2,300, $2,400 a month. Which means you really should be earning more like $8,000. That's $100K. Okay, so $100K jobs, that's not the average salary for most people, right?
Sure. So when we talk about the rates, the home being priced basically over value right now, what happens when the market stabilizes and someone has a mortgage payment for a home that's not worth what the mortgage says?
So in we have to look at the past. History kind of repeats itself, but this time around things are different. In 2006 and 2007, people were financing homes at an inflated price with an adjustable rate mortgage. Right. So, if their mortgage was fixed for 6 months or 1 year, after that time period, then the interest rate might have gone up from 3% to 4%, which caused their monthly payment to balloon up a couple $100 a month, and that broke the bank, and they gave up on paying the mortgage, and they ended up having to go into foreclosure or do a short sale, in which case, that house, they would have to sell the house, what we call underwater, which is what you're referring to, where the equity of that house would be, would be lost. So right now, fortunately, people are not getting adjustable rate mortgages. They're just buying homes at a high price. The interest rates in the beginning of the year were at 3%. Now they're at 5%. So now those monthly payments have increased for the same exact home. But at least they're fixed, right? So if a buyer is buying a home right now and they can afford that monthly payment, so long as they don't have any more disruptions in their income, so long as we don't have another pandemic, or if they don't lose their job, as long as they continue to make the same amount of money. Okay, so that is the thing about buying a home is, not our world, our lives have changed so much that, 20 years ago, it was very common for somebody to get a job and stick with that company for many years. Now we have gig economy. We have, I sell a lot of homes to people who have a high income, but they're on a contract. They might have a 1 or a 2 year contract with the company. It could be a tech job. And, so long as they continue that source of income, they should be fine. But, I know that in reality, that's not always the case. So, eventually this market will level off. What goes up must come down. It has happened time and time again. Home values are not going to go up infinitely. Of course, everybody thinks that way. Right. Okay. And everybody, enjoys the ride up, but that roller coaster right now is literally at the edge, and you're looking over and you start to see, and it's going to drop. So everybody wants to know, what's that drop going to look like? Okay.
That's my next question. Can you explain for people what that will look like? I know we had spoken a little bit off the record some time ago. I'm not sure if you can share that, as far as
absolutely.
As far as your ability to speak on it, from a hypothetical perspective, and being licensed and all. So Art, I guess the first part is, can you explain to listeners what an appraisal waiver is and how that impacts the current market? The current market for the buyer.
Yes, perfect. So right now, let's take, for example, a home that is put on the market for $300,000. Okay, $300,000 house. Now, there's so many buyers that they might bid the price of that home from 300 up to 330, 10% over where it's priced. Okay, so let's say this buyer is going to put 10% down on 330, that's 33,000, and they need closing costs, which could be another 17. So they need $50,000 cash to buy the house. However, the mortgage company is going to send out an appraiser with it, sometime within 7 or 10 days. And the appraiser is going to value the house based on other properties that have sold and closed, comparable sales. And then he's going to have 3 of those, and then he's going to have 3 other properties that are going to be supporting and back up for his valuation. Now, homes are selling so quickly and the prices are rising so quickly that there aren't enough homes that have closed for that appraiser to use to give that house a value of 330. He might find properties that have closed at 300, 305, 310. And if he averages those 3, he might come up with a value of 308. So if the sale price is 330, the mortgage company is only going to give you a loan for 90% of that value. You're putting 10% down. They're only going to give you a loan of 90% on the appraised value, 90% of 307, which means if that buyer needs to have the extra cash to make up the difference. So when a buyer's making an offer, they're going to set a limit or a dollar amount on what they're willing to pay the difference between the sale price and the appraised value. All right. So a buyer with a lot of cash, that same buyer is putting 10% down, paying closing costs, and needs $50,000 to buy that house. They need to have let's say they have another $20,000 in the bank left over. So that's the maximum amount they can agree is $20,000 to pay the difference between 330. That appraisal comes in at 310. They've got the $20,000. They're going to put that money down, and everything's going to be fine. Okay, so that's some buyers who have a lot of cash will waive the appraisal altogether, but most buyers don't have enough money to waive because nobody knows how much that, I call it the spread between the sale price and the appraised value. I see a lot of clients who have an extra $5,000 to $10,000, maybe $15,000. And that's, buyers who have that cash and who agree to pay the spread on the appraisal are the buyers that are getting selected by the sellers.
Sure. So that brings up a couple of points that I want to make. I know people who are looking for homes and having a hard time, the house sells, or they're in they're like, let's say they're newly married, they're living in an apartment or they want to buy a home, but the market being as though the pricing, they want to know how much do I need to have saved? Why is it that they didn't accept my offer? What should I do in this current market? Should I buy a home right now? So starting with the amount of money down, what is a reasonable or amount that someone should expect to have available to put down and looking for a home?
Yeah, great question. So since I've been using the $300,000 value, we'll stick with that. So now you can get now lenders are creating conventional mortgages with that, and they'll finance 100% of the purchase price, which still means that the buyer needs to have enough money for closing costs. Okay, so closing costs on a $300,000 house are going to be anywhere from, let's say, $12,000 to $15,000 total. So, the first question I always ask somebody who buys a home is, how much cash have you set aside to buy a home, right? Not how much cash do you have in total, but so you might have $20,000 in savings, and you might have a 401k with 50 or 60,000, and you're going to borrow another 10,000 from the 401k. So the first thing I try to tell them is, let's decide exactly how much cash you have, because that is going to determine how to make the strongest possible offer you can.
Sure.
Okay. So let's say somebody has a $300,000 house and they've got $30,000. So if they qualify for 100% conventional loan, then they're going to need closing costs. So I have a client right now in this exact scenario. So closing costs are about $15,000. They have 30. So I'm like, okay, we're going to make an offer, conventional mortgage, 100% financing of the purchase price. You're going to need 15,000, and you're going to have 15,000 left over. Well, they don't want to spend the entire 30K. They want to have a little bit money left over after they buy the house to pay for moving expenses and maybe some furniture and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, I always ask them, you have 30,000 total. What's your, tell me how much you're willing to part with. So let's say it's 20, so it's 25 grand. So that means they're going to have $10,000 left over. That's the amount of money that they need to be able to offer to cover the difference between the sale price and the appraisal. That's literally. Now, one more thing that they can do to make their offer stronger is they can offer to pay the seller's transfer tax. So that's 1%, which is 3 grand. So in this case, I'm going to say, okay, we're going to offer 307. The asking price is 300. We're going to offer 307, but you're going to pay 1%, an additional 1%. You're going to pay the seller's transfer tax. So to the seller, that's the same as getting 310. They're getting 307 plus 3,000 because they're getting those transfer tax paid, which normally would come out of their equity, their net. And 307 is better because if the appraisal came in at 300, that buyer needs 7 grand. If the if the purchase price was 310 and the appraisal came in at 300, they would need $10,000. So it literally just keeps that sale price down 1%, which reduces the risk or the spread of that appraisal down the road. It's a little bit better of an offer for a seller, and for the buyer, it's kind of the same exact thing. It doesn't really make a difference if a buyer is paying additional transfer tax for the seller, and then they actually save a little bit money over the length of the loan because they're getting a lower sale price. So the mortgage is going to be on a slightly lower amount. It's a little bit more money up front, but over time, it's a better way to finance the property.
So with homes selling so quickly, how can a new home buyer compete in this existing market?
So yeah, I mean, I'm always just telling home buyers up front, setting the expectations. So I had another new home buyer call me today, and her price range is right around $200K, and she has $15,000. So the first thing I need her to do is find out what type of mortgage she's going to get, and that's going to determine how much cash she's going to need. Okay, so let's say on 200K, if she can get the 100% conventional financing, she's only going to need about, let's say, $12,000, $10,000 to $12,000 in closing costs. And that's great because she can make an offer without a seller's assist, right? Because the seller's assist is money that you have to add to the purchase price, and then the seller gives it back to you to pay your closing costs. So adding money to the purchase price raises the final sale price, which puts you in jeopardy of having this appraisal come in less than the sale price. Okay, so that's the best thing. She 15K may not be enough for her to offer to pay the seller's transfer tax. Okay, and so in this market, I'm telling buyers right up front that hey, in a normal market, if you had 15 grand, you would be good to go, right? We would be out there shopping for homes. You would find one, make an offer. You might get a $5,000 or a $10,000 seller's assist, right? You might only end up needing $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 total, okay? Because we could get the seller to pay some of your closing costs. You would get to do a home inspection. How does that sound? Like right now, buyers have to waive the home inspection.
Right.
So that's, another thing I always tell the buyers, I'm like, look, I'm not a home inspector, but over the course of 20 years, I've attended, 600 or 700 or 800, hundreds and hundreds of home inspections. I don't want the liability. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but, basically, a home inspector might crawl under a basement or into an attic, and I might not do that, but I'll do the best I can to tell this buyer, hey, look, I don't see any obvious red flags. I would never advise a buyer to waive an inspection for a septic system. Okay, septic systems can cost $10,000 to repair or $40,000 to replace. So that's never something I'm willing to take a gamble on. But you can determine 90% of a home's problems are water related, and it's either water coming in from above or water coming in from below. Okay, or through the sides. Either way, it's a problem with the roof, or the worst thing is always water in the basement
Mm-hmm.
in the basement is everyone's biggest fear.
Sure. Now, just to back up for a second, I want to be fair to anybody that may be listening. Can you explain to them what buyer's assist is? I know we know what that is, but for someone who may say, hey, I've always wanted to purchase a home, but I have no idea what the process looks like. And maybe they don't have $50,000 to put down on a home, or maybe even
Yes.
20,000. Can we explain
Sure.
to anyone listening exactly what that is?
Perfect. So, let's use the $300,000 example. Let's say you qualify for, we'll use an FHA mortgage
Sure.
example, because when buyers want, buyers say, hey, what's a first-time home buyer program? Well, the FHA mortgage is really the best first-time home buyer program on the market, because it allows you to get the maximum amount of seller's assist up to 6% of the value of the property.
Mm-hmm.
That's the maximum seller's assist you can get. And that 6% cannot exceed the total closing cost. So if the house is $300,000 and an FHA, you have to put 3.5% down. So that's about 10 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And your closing cost might be 15,000, but you can get up to 6% seller's assist, which is 18 grand. So 18 grand can cover the $15,000 closing costs, which means with $10,000 and an FHA mortgage, what you're going to do is you're going to take 300,000, you're going to add 15 grand. So you're going to offer 315,000, and the seller is going to give you back 15 grand to cover those closing costs. So that's how a seller's assist, also known as a seller's credit, that's how that works. Okay.
Sure.
And the one drawback of getting a maximum seller's credit up front when you make the offer is if you're going to have a home inspection and you find problems, the seller usually has two options. They'll pay to have the repairs made, or they would give you a seller's credit. They would give you a seller's assist for the amount of the repair. So let's say you find a $5,000 repair. If you're already receiving the maximum amount of seller's credit allowed by the lender, you can't get an additional $5,000 credit. And, sometimes the seller may have moved. They may be out of state, right? The seller may not have $5,000 cash in their bank account to make the repair. So sometimes that seller's assist could cause a problem if there's a problem with the home inspection. The buyer always has the option to take the property the way it is. They might still want to buy it, and they might, however, the FHA requires an inspection, which is the same as an appraisal. When you're talking an FHA mortgage and you say FHA appraisal, the term is inspection. The inspection and the appraisal are the same thing. It's done by the same person on the same day. So
sure. Now, is that 6%? Thank you. Is that 6%? Is that per state, or is that across the country?
Yeah, so 6% for FHA mortgages is across the board. Okay, and it doesn't have to be 6%. It could be anywhere from $1 up to 6% of the sale price, so long as that 6% doesn't exceed the total closing costs.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you for that explanation.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about agency relationships, can you define for everyone what that also means?
Yeah, so perfect. I do a lot of work with Zillow. Okay, so Zillow is a great example because home buyers will call Zillow and really have no idea who they're talking to and who represents who. Okay, so here's how Zillow works. If you are a agent representing a seller, your listing is going to be on Zillow. Now, a consumer is going to go on Zillow's website, and they'll see several agents. Okay, and at the very bottom, it might say who the listing agent is. However, that listing agent has to pay Zillow a fee in order for anyone who calls to be directed directly to that listing agent. And most listing agents are not paying for that.
Okay.
Right? Zillow is selling all of those other agents who are listed there are buyer's agents. They're paying Zillow to get the phone call from the consumer. Okay. And this is how I get a lot of business. I pay Zillow an arm and a leg every month in order to receive calls from home buyers. Okay. So the home buyer naturally thinks that they're getting connected to the listing agent.
Mhm.
right? I have a set of questions memorized that I try to ask the same exact questions every time I receive the phone call to establish agency and make sure that that consumer knows that when they're talking to me, I'm not the listing agent. Some of them only want to deal with the listing agent. So I always let them know, I always ask them, hey, I'm glad you called. I always ask, are you shopping for a home for yourself or for a friend or family member? I always want to know who am I talking to? Am I talking to the actual buyer? Could be the buyer's relative, right? They're calling for a friend or a family member. So I like to establish that. And, I like to ask, are you moving in from out of town or are you local? Are you, I like to know where they live. It's important. Okay. And I'll let them know. I say, hey, look, I'm happy to schedule an appointment and show you the house. But I would like to know, are you already working with an agent? So I always ask the question to open up the conversation and then tell them the difference of, they get to choose as a buyer who represents them. Okay.
Now, how important is agency representation for the buyer as opposed to the seller?
That's a great question. And it's extremely important. So number one, so I'll let the buyer know. I'll say, hey, look, my name's Wesley. I happen to live in Phoenixville, but I'm licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I've been a realtor for 20 years. Okay. So I have a lot of experience, right? It's my job to offer you my services and see if I can earn your business. And I'm not going to ask you to sign a contract with me immediately. You don't even know me, right? We haven't even met, right? So I like to say, listen, so the first thing I want to know is a lot of home buyers calling for Zillow will immediately say, oh yeah, I'm a first time home buyer. This is the first house I've called about. And, I always offer to show them a house. I say, hey, look, I'm happy to show you this house. I'll meet you and we'll get a chance to tour the house together, right? I'll tell you everything you need to know about the house. And if you feel comfortable and confident with me and you want to hire me, you can, right? So like for me, it's always an option. I'm not a pushy salesman. I'm not like, look, you have to sign a contract with me and blah, 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 right? I always have to, the clients have to know you, like you, trust you. I have to earn their trust to earn their business. Okay.
Sure.
And I'll tell them, I'll say, so here's the deal. If you call the listing agent, it's important for you to know that the seller has a fiduciary responsibility to their client who's the seller, right? They have been hired, they have a contract, they have a legal contract to try to get the seller the best deal possible, right? They have to get the seller the highest price and the best terms. If we're going to go to court, you don't want to be represented by the other party's lawyer. The other lawyer who's there, it's their job to try to win. Okay. Now, real estate is not an adversarial thing. We, as real estate agents, work together. We need to bring parties to an agreement. We're not trying to forcefully do anything. In fact, most of the time we're begging. we're begging everybody for, it's not an adversarial thing. So I'll let a buyer know, hey, look, that seller, the agent and the seller sat down, they looked at statistics and they came up with a price. So we're going to do the very same thing and we have access to the same exact information. So I'm going to sit down with, I'm going to do a market analysis and show you if I was going to put the house for sale, what I would price it at. Now we can also, Zillow can give you a market, a price for a house, but it's going to be a range. It's going to be a range. It could be 5% high or 5% low, right? So, and that's a big deal. If it's a $300,000 house, 5% is 15 grand. So maybe the seller is asking 315 when in fact the comps show a value of 285. That's a $30,000 spread. Zillow might have the same spread. So the first thing I'm going to do is just explain to a buyer that, look, there's no secrets in real estate. We all have access to the same information. It's literally at our fingertips. We pay for access as realtors for this. It's the MLS, and I'm going to do a report. And I'm going to share that with you. Okay. And so go ahead.
Sure. So real quick, I wanted to touch on Zillow. I know a lot of people they see how, I don't want to mention competitors, Zillow, so keep it from being, to go in that direction. But I know,
Realtor.com,
rep and whatever.
anybody.
I know that, I worked for real estate investment companies some time ago, and we use Zillow to find out a lot of information. So how useful is Zillow for the person who probably figures, I don't want to search information that way, I want to search a different way? Can you just explain
Sure.
how useful it is as a platform to find out about the home?
So Zillow is definitely the most user-friendly. It's got a really smooth interface. The information is extensive. It's great. It's very accurate. Zillow is actually, it's affiliated, right? It's affiliated with the MLS system, the multiple listing system. So they're basically just taking the information and putting it in a nice user-friendly format. What they're also doing is they also have misinformation. They have listings that are not actually for sale.
Mhm.
They have foreclosures and short sales and bankruptcies and auctions. So we get a lot of phone calls about properties that, hey, I'm calling about the property and, it's listed on Zillow as a foreclosure. That does not mean it's for sale, and it doesn't mean you can buy it.
Right.
It means that property has filed a lis pendens. It could be in foreclosure status, but that's a long way from being for somebody to be able to purchase it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I always let buyers know, hey, look, that's what if you want to go knock on the door or try to play Sherlock Holmes and track down the seller or the bank, I'm like, look, you might succeed, but
Right.
that may not be something that you want to do, because statistically, you're also up against very savvy investors who
Right.
have teams that are doing this 24/7. So, I always let people know, hey, use Zillow. If you see a property that you're interested in, just text me the address. I'm going to use the MLS. The MLS now has an app, very easy to install, called HomeSnap. HomeSnap is the best app to use for searching a home. And when you're working with an agent, if you you can send messages back and forth to each other through HomeSnap.
Mm-hmm.
The buyer can create their own saved search with an area, a price range, beds and baths. They can basically be their own real estate agent. They can find the listings, and I say, look, you guys just download the app. Any house that you like, you can text me the address, or you can send me a message through HomeSnap. I'll pull it up immediately, make sure it's still available. I have access to contact the listing agent directly, so I can send them an in-app message to make sure that they haven't already accepted an offer, or maybe they've already set an offer deadline.
Sure. Real quick, I'm just thinking in terms of the listener, why is HomeSnap? Why do you feel like that's the best app?
So HomeSnap is directly connected to the MLS. It's
Okay.
literally it's the app for agents and buyers and home buyers to use. It's the app version of the MLS. So if you want the desktop version of the MLS, you have to be a licensed realtor. Okay, but they created HomeSnap as the interface for the public, so you don't have to be. Anybody can download HomeSnap. It's just you're getting information that's current with the MLS. And Zillow is not, and Realtor.com is not, and all those websites are great because those companies are spending a fortune on marketing. They're getting in front of the public. They're bringing them all in, and then they're selling those leads to real estate agents who want to represent those buyers. That's kind of how that works. So it's very important for a home buyer to know, to say, hey, look, the reason you want to pick a buyer's agent, it's going to save you a massive amount of time, right? Any property that you see, all you have to do is just text it to your real estate agent and let them track the seller's agent down. Let them find out when the open house is. Maybe you want to go out and see 4 or 5 homes at a time. The real estate agent is going to schedule that, book the tour. They're your tour guide, right? They also need to know what they're talking about when it comes to the mechanics of a home. They're going to protect you. They're going to be able to tell you, show you red flags when you go see a property. A good buyer's agent with experience is going to know what to look for on a home tour. And then, of course, last but not least, especially in a competitive market, when it comes to making an offer, that real estate agent is going to tell the buyer how to make the strongest possible offer and have a chance to win, and negotiate and,
Sure.
protect them. So that's the condensed version. I could talk for hours on this.
So when someone's looking for a realtor, what is the best way to solidify a relationship with a realtor that they're working in your best interest? I've heard someone say recently, my realtor hasn't gotten back to me in a long time. I've seen the house go to market, it's sold. I don't know why I'm not getting called back. How can they avoid that? And what would make somebody more competitive other than obviously cash for having more money? How can someone, compete when they're seriously interested in a home, but for whatever reason, their realtor is, whether he's shopping with their clients or whatever the situation is?
That's another great question. So, I don't think the realtor has to live in that specific neighborhood or area or school district, right? What's more important is that a realtor is tech savvy, right, and communicates, right? Especially right now, that realtor, they're people too, so they have to sleep, they have to eat, they might have to spend time with their kids and stuff like that. Okay, but realtors are literally plugged in and on call almost all the time, right? I do shut down on occasion, but for the most part, I'm going to respond. If I'm in the shower, I'm going to get back immediately, right? I want to give that client service. So they have to communicate. Okay. They have to. But they don't necessarily, so like I'll cover an area, I'll drive generally up to 2 hours from where I live. I'll go to Harrisburg, I'll go to Trenton, I'll go to South Jersey, I'll go to the shore if I have to. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a big ticket, right? It's just, I'm human too. So some clients I meet and they're sweet, and I'll go to the edge of the world for these people. I don't care if they're buying a house for $60,000, within reason. I got to make sure as a businessman, my time isn't wasted. But, over the years, I've learned that if you give great service to somebody and you do go out of your way, maybe you consider it pro bono. I helped a lady rent a rental, and I think I only made $700 commission, which sounds like a lot, but isn't really a lot when you break it down by the hour, the amount of hours I spent. I might have made $6 an hour on that deal. maybe
help somebody.
Maybe I made 10 or 12 bucks an hour on average. Okay, but literally, she referred me to other clients who sold a house and bought a house, and that was $500,000 worth of sales. So I ended up making $12,000 or $13,000 from her referral. Okay, so that's why a good realtor, now an honest realtor will also tell a buyer, hey, the area you're looking, it's a little too far. Like I don't take everybody. Sometimes I have to say, hey, look, I can't help you find a rental right now, simply because I just don't have the time, and I won't be able to get you. I can't really commit that kind of time to you. But what I will do is I'll try to find somebody else who's on my team or in my network that that lives in your neighborhood, right? Like I'll try to help. I'll try to help anybody as best I can in that. But the consumers need to realize that there are a million real estate agents. Everybody knows a realtor, right? Everybody's a realtor. They just haven't got a license yet, too.
I've helped many people.
Yeah,
I don't sell homes.
Yeah. So having a friend is great. However, friends don't always tell you the hard truth. They don't want to hurt your feelings or something like that, right? So having a friend is not always the best option, especially when it comes to selling your house. They're going to walk in and they're going to tell you everything you want to hear, but that's not necessarily what's best for buying and selling a house, right? You need the stone cold truth, right? So I like to give truth. I like to try to give it in a way I try to use humor, make it light, but I don't want people to I'm like, look, I've told more people over the past 3 months that is not the time to buy a house than I have in 20 years combined. And, the first question I always ask is, okay, like how much are you paying in rent?
Sure.
And, and if it's not if it's not a lot. So the woman I talked to today who called me about buying a house for 200 or 220,000. She's only paying $850 a month rent, and she's month to month, and they're not threatening to raise her rent. Okay. So I said, hey, first of all, and she already researched, she wants more space. It would cost her at least $1,500 for her to change rentals. And that's why she, if she could purchase a home and have a payment of $1,500, that's why she would rather buy.
Sure.
But, you know, the first thing I said is, hey, look, you know, if your life is not threatened where you are in your rental, if you are happy and being, you know, if you're okay there, that's not a bad option, right? It could be worse. Sometimes I get phone calls by people who are renting and the landlord has given them 30-day notice because the landlord wants to cash out at the high price, you know. So I always let them know. I say, hey, look, you know, landlords cannot just throw you out of the house. You know, possession's 9/10 of the law. You have rights as a tenant. You know, so you know, I always try to tell people, look, you know, don't let somebody bully you out of the house. They can't. We don't live in that kind of world anymore. We're people can throw you out on the street. You know, so that's another thing.
The landlord's crazy.
Yeah, it's some of them are. Some of them are, but
sure.
Yeah, I guess the best way to answer that question is, you know, you have to have a realtor that has enough experience to be honest, that is not going to live or die on that sale. That's another thing, you know, that comes with experience and being successful, is that, you know, I don't feel pressure to close the next deal. Okay. And a lot of people in this business don't have a lot of experience, haven't built up a steady stream of income. A lot of realtors, you know, it is a glamorous career, but looks, you know, the cover of the book is a lot better than the contents in a lot of cases. Okay. So, you know, I have lived high on the hog and I have gone broke, you know, over the course of 20 years. You know, thank God right now I'm in a position where, you know, I'm good. You know, I'm secure. I'm safe. You know, I'm by no means am I rich and ready to retire, but you know, that's the thing. I'm not stressed out to where I have to compromise on my ethics and standards in order to try to sell a house. That's what you got to be afraid of, right? It's like, you know, it's like going to buy a car and the slick car salesman is trying to sell you a car. That's, you know, and I think buyers know when you know, buyers, people are smart, you know, they know when they're dealing with somebody, they can smell the BS, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I would tell people, hey, look, if you're not feeling comfortable and very confident in your you know, if your radar is going up, you know, just listen to that, because it's true, you know, and I said, not. Yeah, like your intuition will tell you if that realtor really does have and that's what it's about. It's about a realtor putting the client's interests first. That's what representation means, right? It is your interests supersede my own, right? You have to, a good real estate agent, you know, that becomes kind of second nature.
So let's get back to home mechanic basics for the sake of this question. And what are the mechanics of the home that every buyer should know? Perfect.
So, you know, let's start from the top down. You always want to check the roof. A lot of the times you can see if it's a 3-dimensional shingle, if it's layered. If it's 2-dimensional, it's flat. So three-dimensional roofs generally last longer and are better. Okay, so you can visually take a look at a roof, and then you can check the seller's disclosure. And if the seller knows when the roof was installed, that'll tell you right off the bat. So always check the seller's disclosure for the roof. Then you're going to look at the chimney and you're going to see if it's cracked, if it's got a cap. And then you're going to look at the exterior of the house, check out the brick. Again, you're going to see if the mortar of the brick is washed out or if the siding is blown off. Then you're going to just work your way down, check the windows. Are the windows surrounded by aluminum? Have they been capped? Have they been flashed? Or is it an older house with the wooden windows and is there wood rot? Is the paint fading?
No, one second, because I know I have more of a experience in accounting and construction, and most people probably may not know what flashed. Can you explain to them exactly what that means?
So just think of your gutters, right? Your gutters are made of aluminum and your gutters are attached to the house. and they're generally attached into a piece of wood on the roof, right? And that any wood on the exterior of the home, when it's flashed, it's basically encased in aluminum. Okay? It's wrapped. I just call it flashing. So any exterior wood should be flashed. Ideally, it could be flashed with aluminum. It could be flashed with PVC. It could be some type of plastic product, but most of the time it's aluminum. And that's going to be, all that trim work around where the gutters are, and then around the windows. Those are the spots. So you check that out, and then you check the slope of the house. You want to check grading. You want to make sure that the house is pitched, so water coming down is going to go away from the house. You want to make sure that the gutters have extensions that are 6 or 8 feet away from the foundation of the house, because a lot of times the gutter is just dropping water straight down, and then you go down to the basement and that's where the water is. So, so I always tell a home buyer, hey, look, you focus on if you like the lay of the land, if you like the neighbors, the view, right? And I tell them, I'm going to focus on the grading and the flashing. I'm going to be looking at red flags and making notes. I just want you to focus on, can you picture yourself living here, right? So that's the exterior, right? That's what to focus on. Generally, the roof, the shell of the house, and the slope. You got to make sure, maybe there's a hill that slopes towards the house. The driveway's going downhill. Okay, so you want to look for, do they have how is the water managed? Is there a berm, or is there a water retention system outside? All right, so you're going to look for that. Then, your next biggest ticket item is going to be the heater. So you're going to want to determine, is it a oil heater? Is it a gas heater? Is it an electric heater? It's usually one of the three: oil, gas, electric. Gas could be natural gas hooked up, or it could be propane, it could be on-site gas, right? Then you're going to want to determine, how is that heat delivered? Is that heater heating hot air and blowing it into the house through vents, or is that heater heating hot water pipes, circulating hot water throughout the house? Those are your two most common types of heaters and heating systems. So you determine that. Sometimes the age of the heater will be written on there with a black magic marker. Most heaters have a lifespan of about 21 years. Now, some of the boilers could last 50 years. And some of these big old boilers that are could be fired from gas or oil. It's almost like a car. Over the course of 50 years, they've had major components replaced. Those things kind of go on and on and on. But you want to look at because a new heater for a small house could cost $3,500, but a big old boiler on a bigger house could cost $17,000 or even $20,000. So it's quite a big range. So that's mechanically, you want to check out your heating system, and then your air conditioning system. Air conditioning systems are usually pretty easy. They're sitting outside. It's that square thing, right? So you go up to it, you look at it, you can right away tell if it looks like an old Datsun car. If it looks like an old car, it's rusty, then it's living on borrowed time. But if it's nice and new, if it's shiny, then again, you might have an age written on it, and then you check the seller's disclosure. Okay, so then you're going to look at your water heater. That's not a big ticket item. A new water heater could be $1,200 or $1,800, $1,500 on average, or maybe you want to convert to a tankless water heater. That might be $3,000 or $3,500, but you'll check that out. And then that's the biggie, the roof, and then you're going to check the basement, right? I consider the basement. Does it have a sump pump? Is it a French drain? Okay, a French drain is just a space between the floor and the wall. So any water that could come in is basically the force of gravity is just going to lead it around the perimeter of the basement into a sump pump, and the sump pump's going to pump it out. Okay, so we live in an area where water tables are high, and we get a lot of rain in this climate. So basements get water. It's literally just a question of when and how much are they going to get, right? Newer homes are built with a water system around the exterior of the house. But older homes have nothing around the exterior and nothing on the interior either. They literally just have cinder block, maybe poured concrete, a floating slab that's sitting on, 4 to 6 inches of concrete, hopefully sitting on top of dirt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, over time, it's called a monolithic pour. When they pour the basement, it's one giant piece of concrete. Over time, it'll crack and water will come up from subterranean, the water will come up.
Sure.
And, all of that's fine. That's all, so long as that water is being managed, right? So if you want to retrofit an older home, you might have to put that water remediation system around the perimeter of the interior of the house. That's going to cost you approximately $100 per linear foot.
Mm-hmm.
So you just measure the footprint of the house. You might have 2 walls that are 40 feet and 2 that are 20. So that's 40 times 2 is 80 plus 40 is 120 feet, linear feet, times 100, that's 12 grand. And you might need 2 sump pumps at $1,000 each. That's 14,000. You might as well just round it up to 15 grand. And that's what's going to cost you to retrofit a basement for that system. So that, that's another thing that I'm always checking when I walk into a house is I'll check and see if that has been done. How is the water in the basement being managed? That's a big ticket item. Then you're going to have, is it a well? If it's a well pumps are not too expensive. And the equipment, the filter for, you're taking well water, you're pumping it out of a well with a pump. Then you're going to bring the water into the house and you're going to filter it and you're going to soften it and filter it. So there's 2 major components to a water system that's functioning on a well. Generally that groundwater is going to be hard water. You're going to want to soften it, and then you're going to want to filter out any impurities, right? So that equipment is a little bit more expensive than the pump. And then you have your sewage system, your septic system. So you have all of the plumbing inside of the house. Older plumbing is either going to be lead or copper. Newer plumbing is going to be PVC, also known as PEX, plastic, right? And you might have combinations. So you're going to check and see, did they replace some of the plumbing with PVC, and is that attached to older copper or older lead? That's not ideal. The ideal thing is if you want to rip out old plumbing, you should replace it all new with the same type of plumbing. But that's a big expense. So you've got your plumbing for hot and cold water, and then you've got your septic, your sewage removal system. That's a big ticket item, which most home buyers forget, right? So you can see that thick septic system pipe in the basement, and those were made usually with lead pipe, and it's fine if they corrode and you can see a crack inside, then you can replace a piece of it with PVC. What you can't see is the pipe that goes underground from the house out to the street, and that distance could be 20 feet, it could be 120 feet. So the cost